over domain 4.6, given a scenario, implement and maintain identity and access management. So now we're finally going to go over IAM. So in our objectives here, we're going to go over a lot of the basic IAM principles, right? How we do permission assignments, federation, SSO, how we do our different access controls. We're going to cover multi-factor authentication again, and then also our password management, right? Our policies, and also our PAM, our privileged access management tools or software. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the provisioning and deprovisioning of user accounts. So the provisioning, deprovisioning user accounts involves managing the lifecycle of user access. So whether we're onboarding, we're offboarding, if we're making on-the-fly changes to give access, we have to make sure that we're also removing access when it's no longer needed. This is just ensuring the appropriate access rights during the tenure and revoking when no longer needed. So we have to establish lifecycle management, right? We have to establish protocols for our help desk team, our system admins, for creating, maintaining, and the eventual deletion of user accounts. We have to make sure that we're meeting security compliance. And we also want to be doing consistent, maybe like quarterly, biannually, account audits, right? We want to do account audits to make sure that we're still following our least privilege principles, that we're not having privilege creep, right? That's kind of the term we use when users that have a long tenure have privilege creep to things they may not need. They have access to things that they don't need anymore. They moved on, right? To a different job role. So permission assignments and implications. So permission assignments involve defining and granting access rights to users, whereas implications refer to the potential security risks and operational effects of these permissions. So assigning permissions, it's going to look different based on your environment. So it's going to be from wherever our management console is of our users, big Microsoft Enterprise, all Active Directory, right? In Linux, that's going to be at the bash script, doing our chmod commands. And then you have like other third-party things like I use G Suite, so I have to go to my Google admin console for that. So during permission assignments, we got to go over our access control. Well, our RBAC, should they have access to? Do we have mandatory access control? We also want to look at our principle of least privilege. We have to ensure that users are granted minimum levels of access, one of our main principles in Zero Trust as well. And we have to look at the security risk. If we do assign permissions inappropriately, that's the implications, right? If we don't assign permissions appropriately, enforcing least privilege, what could happen? Identity proofing. So identity proofing is the process of verifying and validating the identity of a user before granting access to systems and services, ensuring that individuals are who they claim to be. So this is just saying, what's our ongoing authentication? How do we do it? Are we ensuring that we have multiple different factors to make sure that identities can't be stolen? So we can do this contextually, saying, hey, this user's logging in from the typical geographic area, the typical IP address, using username and password. It did its SMS code. Let's give them access. A contextual basis, if they're logging in Africa, it took them 3 tries. We're going to definitely want to do multiple rounds of authentication on that. Federation. So federation allows disparate systems and organizations to share identity, authentication, authorization information, enabling users to access multiple systems with a single identity. What we're saying here is with federation, 2 separate enterprises. One may be the identity provider, one may be the relying party, and that relying party is going to rely on the identity provider to use its authentication and authorization servers and resources to grant users access to their website or their resources. So a lot of words to say, like when you logged into trepatech.com, we have my website, Trepa Tech. I would be the relying party. And we're going to use something like OAuth 2.0, a federation protocol or single sign-in protocol as well, to the identity provider of Google to allow you to sign in to our site, okay? So that's an example of federation and also an example of SSO. These lines kind of get a little blurred, right? I would kind of consider this more of like a single sign-on option, but it's still within the definition of federation that says, hey, enabling users to access multiple systems with a single identity. So that's federating services. Google's federating their services across the many, many third-party applications. Now let's take into account like acquisitions. Like let's say companies are merging and now we have two separate Active Directory forests, and users from example.com will need to access resources from example1.com. That's why they merged, right? They had similar names. Well, now we may need to configure some transitive trust here to allow that users can access some resource here and users can access resources here. This happens a lot within the DoD, right? Within the different enterprises of like regular Army and SOF and even like other environments within the Army or the DoD where there's that transitive trust, but you still may be able to access websites here, right? On that separate domain. But maybe you couldn't just go use your CAC or your credentials to log into a system, okay? So that's that transitive trust. And it's not just as simple, it's very granular in nature, okay? Some federation protocols or single sign-on protocols. We have like OpenID, OAuth 2.0. We have SAML. These are just the different protocols that allow federation and single sign-on. Okay, so SSO is an authentication process that allows the user to access multiple application systems with one set of login credentials. So we can do this while like on enterprise services, guys, with a lot of LDAP integration. So instead of us, like in the days of old when I was a network engineer, we would have our AAA server. I'd have an admin account for that. I'd have an admin account for my systems. I'd have an admin account for like my database. I'd have an admin account for my call manager system, my collaboration tools. I had to manage like 4 or 5 accounts, which is kind of silly, right? Because if we're as an enterprise in Active Directory, wouldn't it be nice if those third parties like TACX, a AAA server, my call manager services, and anything else integrated into Active Directory? Well, that's where LDAP integration comes in. If you don't want to have a bunch of different privileged accounts increasing your attack surface, if you have third parties doing any sort of network management, your telephony services, or anything of that nature, right? Your wireless LAN controller that you have to get consoled into via web GUI, you want to integrate via LDAP. Integrate your LDAP so you can have a single admin account that has set permissions on there via mandatory access control and role-based access control methods. We have OAuth. This employs the open authorization for token-based authentication and authorization. So essentially with us, right, we're doing an API call to get an authorized token to Google services. And when you authenticate your Google account to log into Trepa Tech, they send us a JWT or a JSON web token that says, yes, this user is good to go. That's OAuth in the background. SAML does something similar, it's just a different protocol, okay? It leverages the security assertions markup language for exchanging authentication and authorization, not token-based like OAuth. Right, interoperability. So this refers to the ability of different systems, devices, or applications to connect and communicate in a coordinated way without extra effort from the user. Attestation. So attestation is the process or attestation of validating the integrity and security of a system or component, ensuring it is trustworthy and has not been compromised. Okay, let's go ahead and do our quiz, our first quiz for domain 4.6. Question 1. What is the primary function of lightweight directory access protocol and organizational security? That's going to be C, to provide a directory service for storing and managing user and resource information. This is Active Directory, right, guys? That's what LDAP does. It provides us with a way and a hierarchical nature to do account provisioning and to create user objects. Question 2. How does implementing federation with single sign-on enhance an organization's security? So we're going to go with A. So when we're talking about password fatigue, right? If we allow single sign-on and then also implement MFA in there, right, and contextual authentication, like we don't want to have like impossible travel logins, right? That's going to allow us actually to increase our security, by reducing the threat, the attack surface, by having all these different accounts. Question 3. How do open authorization OAuth and security assertion markup languages contribute to enhancing security in an organization? So we're going to go with A. That's providing protocols for secure and standardized identity verification and authorization across web services and applications. Like we said with OAuth, that's token-based. SAML also does authentication authorization across what's called relying parties or third parties to identity providers like Google, Facebook. Those are identity providers, right? Where you're able to do a lot of that single sign-on. Question 4. What is the primary security benefit of properly provisioning and deprovisioning user accounts? We'll go with B. That's to ensure that users have the appropriate access rights throughout their association with the organization. Question 5. In the context of security, what is the main purpose of attestation? That's going to be A. That's going to have us confirm the integrity and origin of hardware or software components in our enterprise. Question 6. What is the main goal of identity proofing in organization security framework? That's going to be B, right? That's just saying like we're making sure our authentication is almost foolproof or bulletproof, right? Doing multi-factor, having contextual analysis of where a user is trying to authenticate from.